Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome to the book review for Howl's Moving Castle. I forgot something. I will be right back. Alright, let's try this again, shall we? So today we're going to be talking about Howl's Moving Castle. I'll go ahead and give you a little bit of close-up on the cover without the glare. So if you've never read Howl's Moving Castle, this is Sophie, our protagonist, and this is the Moving Castle. Now, if you've seen the movie Howl's Moving Castle, it's gonna look a lot different. And actually, it's kind of funny. Miss Jones, Deanna Wynne Jones, the author, said she always thought of it as just like a hovering sort of craft, didn't have legs, but she really liked how Ghibli imagined the castle itself. So that's really fun. But if you've never read Howl's Moving Castle before, you're probably wondering, okay, what is this? What's the plot? Who's the characters? We don't understand. Don't worry. So the premise of the story is you have Sophie Hatter. She's 17 and the eldest of 3 children, which in her world means that when she goes out to seek her fortune, she's gonna fail, and she's gonna fail hard, because everyone knows that the eldest is doomed to fail. That's how it is. But one day she doesn't get a choice, because the Witch of the Waste comes in to the hat shop that her family's owned for many years and curses Sophie to be an old woman, about 90, Sophie thinks. And so she leaves and tries to find a way to break the spell. And in her searching, she comes upon the moving castle of one wizard Howl, known as Heartless Howl, eats the hearts of young women, and everyone thinks it's literal, but you know, it's not really. But regardless, it is a very funny premise, and she ends up meeting a ton of other people and creatures and learns that there's a lot more to Howl and his castle than anyone really thought. So that's the main premise of the story. I love this book so much. I actually did see the movie before I even knew there was a book, and then I found it in one of the local libraries and decided I'm going to read it, and I'm so glad that I did, because it is a really cozy fantasy story that is a slow burn romance, the slowest burn romance you have ever seen in your life. Really, I don't think either Sophie or Howl realizes how they feel about the other until probably the 3rd to last chapter of the book, if I'm being honest. Maybe Howl figures it out earlier, but he's also he's all over the place, so I don't really know. But I love the dynamic between Sophie and Howl, because it really feels like Howl has not had someone who is willing to match his snark and sass, and Sophie is willing to do both. There are times, because he is a really powerful wizard, that she backs off and she's like, okay, maybe I should be a little more careful. But usually especially when she's really mad at him, you never know. I mean, this man's covered in green slime, and Sophie is like, well, drag him to the bathroom, Michael. Oh yeah, Michael, Howl's apprentice. He is adorable. He's a teenager, and he ends up, like, he has a whole romantic relationship going on in and of himself, and he's just so cute and sweet, and he's very well versed in magic, not nearly as much as Howl, because he's still learning, but he does help Sophie out a lot. And then there's Calcifer. He is a fire demon who has made a contract with Howl, and you find this out pretty much within the same chapter of meeting. No, you find it out within the same chapter of meeting him, so it's not really a spoiler. But he's a very interesting character. He also helps Sophie a lot, but he's also one that you're like, can we trust him? Can we not? I don't know. Sophie feels a little more sympathetic towards him than Howl, though, so take that as you will. And then I find the castle itself is really interesting, because you've got the castle part that wanders around, mainly the town that Sophie lives in. It kind of wanders the hills, and some days it's like you can't even see it. Other days it's like right there within a couple of miles, and it's freaking everybody out because he eats hearts, so like that's a problem. But you have that entrance to the castle. Then you have one in a town called Port Haven. You have another, and honestly I can't remember where that third one is. And then you have one to a mystery place, and that is a spoiler, so I'm not going to say where exactly that is, but it's a really interesting structure that it's fascinating. And I also really love the theme of the importance of belief and words, the effects that those can have on people. Because you find out that many of the spells and even beliefs and traditions have a huge impact on people depending on what they believe and how things are said. You find that it's really important for Sophie. And again, spoilers, I'm trying to keep this as spoiler-free as possible, but this whole thing comes hard on Sophie, and you start to realize that there are things that maybe didn't have to happen, or maybe happened for a different reason than people thought, because of the beliefs that people had about that thing and the words that were spoken around them, the belief that went into those words. So kind of talking in circles now, but it's a really interesting thing, and explores identity and how actions and words from people really affect others, and how our own beliefs affect our views of things. So it's a deep book, but it's one that I would honestly recommend for, it was written for young children. So, anyone from like 3 to 99 or 103, depending on how old you are, right? It's a very relaxing and honestly really funny book that it does a really good job of showing how commonplace magic is, and it's just nobody even blinks an eye at it. I mean, there are some things that are like, oh my goodness, this is crazy, but there's actually an exchange between Howl and another magic user in the story where they have this giant fight. It's supposed to be to the death, but it's not. And everyone just like goes outside and watches. Like, it's not even a, oh my goodness, whatever could that be? Nah, it's Howl duking it out with somebody out there, like, whatever. And people are making comments throughout, like, what are they doing? Don't they have any decency to do that, like, away from the ships or whatever? And it's really funny. Speaking of funny, the chapter titles in this book are fantastic. I just want to read you some of my favorites. Chapter 1, in which Sophie talks to hats. Chapter 5, which is far too full of washing. Chapter 6, in which Howl expresses his feelings with green slime. Whoops. There are a few more. Chapter 12, in which Sophie becomes Howl's old mother. Chapter 16, in which there's a great deal of witchcraft, which is a total understatement for the entire book, and it's hilarious. And then chapter 19, probably the funniest of them all, in which Sophie expresses her feelings with a weed killer. And she does. Very violently. And it's fantastic. So I've been rereading this again, right? And I just got finished with that chapter. oh, how messed up. Big time. And almost gets weed killered, and it's quite funny. But I love this book. Would definitely rate this as 5 stars. I'm reading it again, so I don't usually do that with a lot of books. It's just like, oh, that was cool, and maybe I'll read some sections of it, but no, I just went whole hog and decided to read it again. So 5 stars if you love slow burn romance, cozy fantasy with just the right amount of action, some really good solid themes that honestly you could read to your kids or your nieces and nephews, grandkids, whoever it is. And yes, the reason that I am wearing this jacket and the wig and the shirt is because I actually love cosplaying and dressing up as different characters. This was from a con a couple years back, and I honestly loved it because I actually saw some Sophies from the movie, and it was so fantastic. But that will be all for Howl's Moving Castle. And this next week, I'm going to have a lot of things on my plate. So I'm going to go ahead and announce the book that we're doing for the next book review that I will not have time to read through because it's a thick one and I'll be busy. But this one is called The Hidden Child by Louise Fane. And this is one that when I saw it on the shelf at my local library, I flipped out because I had never seen a book like this. And you may or may not be able to tell why from the blurb, but I'll explain in next week's book review. So just a sneak peek. A shameful secret threatens to destroy a family. Eleanor Hamilton is happily married and is mother to a charming 4-year-old girl, Mabel. Her husband, Edward, is a leading light in the burgeoning eugenics movement, which is designing the very ideas that will soon be embraced by Adolf Hitler. But when Mabel develops debilitating epileptic seizures, their world fractures. Their daughter's shameful illness must be kept hidden, or Edward's life's work and the family's honor will be in jeopardy. When Eleanor discovers Edward has been keeping secrets, she calls into question everything she believed about genetic inferiority, and her previously unshakable faith in her husband disintegrates. Alarmed, distressed, and no longer able to bear the family's burden, Eleanor takes matters into her own hands. Inspired by her personal experience, author Louise Fane illuminates the moral and ethical issues of well-intentioned yet flawed science in an era shaped by xenophobia, prejudice, and fear. Vividly rendered, deeply affecting, and impeccably researched, The Hidden Child is a sweeping story with a richly drawn portrait of a family torn apart by shame, deceit, and dangerous ideals. So that is all for this week. Again, next week we're going to be reading The Hidden Child by Louise Fane. And if you want to pick up Howl's Moving Castle for yourself, you can look in your local library. You can also go to Barnes & Noble. That's where I found my copy. Or probably many other major retailers like Amazon. You should also check your local bookstore because you never know what you might find in there. You might find Howl's Moving Castle. You might also find some other things. Deanna Wynne Jones wrote a lot of books. I haven't read any of her other ones, but I'm hoping to get a hold of the rest of the series involving Howl and Sophie, because yes, it is a series. She was busy writing for like 30 plus years. It's insane. But I will see y'all on Monday. Have a great weekend.